The Russian and Ukrainian foreign ministers will meet today in Turkey, in the first high-level contact between Kiev and Moscow since the war began. Both the Russian and Ukrainian delegations, which includes their respective foreign ministers, have arrived in Turkey. Both Lavrov and Kuleba held separate meetings with their Turkish counterpart just a short while ago. Now, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who has pushed for Turkey to play a bigger role in the mediation process, has expressed hope that the talks can help bring about a ceasefire. Turkey is keen to maintain strong relations with both sides, despite the conflict. Erdogan is also scheduled to speak to U.S. President Joe Biden sometime today. So far, both Russia and Ukraine have engaged in multiple meetings, though the issues discussed have been largely devoted to humanitarian issues. But while Ukraine sent senior officials, Moscow did not send any ministers to the talks. But expectations of any breakthrough from today's meeting remain low. Kuleba said that the success of the talks would depend on what instructions Lavrov received from the Kremlin. However, leading up to this meeting, both sides have visibly softened their public positions. Russia has narrowed its demands, only focusing on Ukraine's neutrality and the status of its Russian-occupied regions. Zelensky, for his part, has signaled possibly giving up on his bid to get a NATO membership and even compromise over the status of the separatist regions now controlled by Russia. Turkey is trying to maintain an actively neutral role in the ongoing conflict. It is a traditional ally of Ukraine and has supplied it with drones that Kiev has actually used against Russia. But Turkey also seeks to maintain good ties with Moscow, on which it relies heavily on gas imports and tourism revenues. While Erdogan called the Russian invasion unacceptable, Ankara has not yet joined Western sanctions against Moscow and refused to close its airspace to Russian planes. The visit to Antalya is Lavrov's first trip abroad since Russia invaded Ukraine, and the West imposed biting sanctions on Moscow that have virtually isolated it from the world. The meeting is likely to be tense. Since Kuleba last week described Lavrov as the Ribbentrop of his time, referring to the foreign minister of Nazi Germany in World War II. Now, Andriy Telezenko, former diplomat and senior policy advisor to the first deputy prime minister of Ukraine, is joining us live on this broadcast from Kiev. Thank you for being with us. Now, do we expect any breakthrough in talks between Lavrov and Kuleba that are happening right now? Kuleba has said that he was leaving for the talks with a strong negotiating position, but expectations from this meeting are limited.
Hello, and thank you for having me on. Unfortunately, yes, the expectations are low at this moment because for what we saw the previous negotiations which Ukraine had with the Russian Federation on even the evacuation of people from eastern Ukraine were in 3 phases. We could not reach an agreement from the first time. So this negotiation is a much higher level. The first basically official meeting between 2 high-ranking officials, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kuleba from Ukraine, and Mr. Lavrov from Russia. And the only first positive thing is that this meeting is happening relatively fast compared to what we could have expected. And we're hoping that this first step, with the help of Turkey, will help Ukraine bring peace in this process and to save as much of the Ukrainian lives as possible at this moment, because Russia needs to go for a compromise. Russia attacked Ukraine. Russia needs to understand that the world will turn around from Russia, and Ukraine is winning in the situation more than anybody else in the world. Unfortunately, we're losing our lives for our win, and we have to save as many Ukrainian lives as possible in this situation at this moment. So I think these negotiations are very positive that they're happening from a diplomatic point of view. And I do hope, even though with low expectations, that there will be a compromise in the steps from Russia and Ukraine, and especially from Russia, because they are the ones who attacked Ukraine. They need to rethink their foreign policy and the way how they see the world, because I did not expect that this would happen. I hoped that this would not happen, but unfortunately, colder minds did not prevail in this situation. And now cooler minds have to come together and sit down and make peace in the world, because this might lead to more bloodshed, not only in Ukraine, but further elsewhere in Europe and other regions in the world.
Right. Now, President Zelensky has indicated that Ukraine was not looking at joining NATO as an option, at least for now, while Russia has indicated that it's okay with Ukraine joining the EU. Do we see some kind of possible middle ground here?
Of course, I think for middle ground for Ukraine not joining NATO, we need guarantees from the West and our allies around Ukraine, not the ones that we had when we gave away our third nuclear arsenal in the world. More than 1,300 nuclear warheads Ukraine gave away for peace and signed the Budapest Memorandum. We're not talking about the Budapest Memorandum now. We're talking about today's negotiations, what we can gain, what Ukraine can gain by making peace and by not joining a military force like NATO for our own protection. What can the West offer us for these guarantees? Not just words or on paper, but direct guarantees, economical, military, and political guarantees from all our allies, and Russia including, so they will not invade Ukraine or tear Ukraine apart any further and save lives of millions of people. Those options are the West talking about IMF loans, that Ukraine has more than $57 billion in the IMF loans. If we can cut half of them off, and for Ukraine, that'd be great economical support at this moment, or all of them, for our own security, and offer us protection in a political, in a way that would not interrogate Russia, and, as I said, save Ukrainian lives at this moment. This is the first step that we need to take and talk and negotiate with all our allies, Turkey including, and even India. India is a player in this situation. We should not forget about the economical ties of India with Russia and also China, and we can talk about those situations and have everybody on the table who can sit down and offer us peace. And that's what we should be working on right now.
Right now, these talks come amid the huge claim and counterclaim about the attack on a maternity hospital in Mariupol, which Russia has now dubbed as fake news, while Ukraine has called it genocide by Russia. What are your comments on this?
It's a terrible situation, what is happening, and this is the face of a war, a face of Russia today, when you have a country which is thought of being powerful military country and having weapons that can hit directly something, but with caution, they're hitting everything they can see. As a great example is the maternity ward and hospital, which from one information that's right now rising in the Ukrainian news is around 5 dead already and 8 wounded from what they found in the rubbles. And there's women and children there, which is a terrible situation. This is war and this is genocide against Ukrainians, which has to stop. And there's millions of Ukrainians now fleeing because their homes got bombarded, and a lot of lives are being lost. More than by the UN, more than 1,500 Ukrainian lives of civilians have been lost within these last days of war, which is terrible. And this is just the official part, which is not official. We will find out later on. But this has to end. My parents' house got bombarded one of the first days of the war in Kiev, and half of the house is missing. So this is an example of what we're seeing today. People are dying. The country's being destroyed. There's massive destructions around the country. And what next is this? What next Russia wants? Does it want to wipe out Ukraine totally, or does it want to sit down and talk, negotiate with, as what they call ourselves neighbors? We should stop this genocide from Russia, and we should unite around Ukraine, because we are taking the hit today, and think about a solution. What can be saved? What can be done in this whole situation?
Absolutely. Andriy, thank you very much for joining us with all your valuable comments and insights there.
WION, now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.